All right, it is Saturday, January 30th, 2021, and we want to say welcome to the Pastor's Roundtable. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good to see you guys.
It's not working.
All right, nobody wants to talk to me today. I'm not sure if anybody can hear me. Let's keep going here. Make sure if anybody out there can hear me. Doesn't look like Roger is hearing me at all. What about Dr. Henry? Dr. Henry, are you hearing me? It doesn't look like anybody is hearing me right now. But if you're in the chat right now, and if you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. Dion, you can hear me now?
I can hear you. I think Roger came off.
All right, we just lost Pastor Wade. He should be back momentarily, but it is good to see each and every one of you that are with us today in the chat. Before we go any further, we need you to do us a favor. We are hosting today from South Georgia, and South Georgia, where life is just as slow as the internet out here, and so we're not able to, I was trying to do my shares, Dr. Henry, during that countdown, and my screen was just spinning. I couldn't even get the share window to open up. So those of you that are joining us right now, we need you to help us out. We need you to hit that share button, share it to a group, share it to a friend, tag somebody, bring them into today's edition, because we know that there's something that we've got for you today that you are absolutely going to want to hear, going to want to weigh in on. And so we are looking forward to your participation and even your questions as we go forward with today. Dr. Henry, how has your week been, man?
Well, listen, my week has been very, very eventful. We started off with just getting prepared because, we have a special person that's here today. So I had to make sure that I prepared everything for him. And I'll talk about him just a little bit later because I want him to come on. And we got our church together doing a project at our church, and it just been nonstop. So that's my week. Just a busy week.
I hear you.
Yes, sir.
I hear you. Well, look,
I don't know if you can hear me, if you're still buffering right now, or.
Yes, I hear you perfectly. Perfectly.
Okay, so I believe you are frozen now.
I'm frozen now. Okay, I'm not frozen on my end.
All right.
But all right, we're just gonna keep rolling, hoping this works out here. All right, so we are excited today because we were going to be doing this program. Am I still buffering? I'm still frozen?
No, no, you're not. It's just blurry. Yeah.
All right.
And then as you were talking, it seems like it was going really fast. It's almost like the chipmunks
playing catch up.
It's like catch up.
Oh wow.
Oh.
Well, just so you know, if you can hear me fine now, I am seeing you fine, I am hearing you fine, and I'm not seeing any of that on my end. All right, here comes Pastor Wade is back in. There we go. Hopefully. He can hear us now. Pastor Wade, can you hear us now?
I can hear and I can see much better. I had to reboot my router so I can be a part of this wonderful experience.
All right. So it appears that on my end, my video may be buffering in and out, and sounds like my audio is lagging just a bit. So if you guys catch that, then you guys just run with it, and I'll just be quiet in the background here. Listen, last week's Pastor's Roundtable, what did you guys think? How did it feel?
Listen, I was really intrigued on last week's program, and we had these heavyweight individuals, guests that came on the show. Pastor Everett Brown just giving us a report from Jamaica, the Union president. Oh my goodness, powerful. And then we had Jamie on. I think my takeaway is, listen, this virtual space that we're occupying now is here to stay. And there are tools, there are resources out there that we can utilize so that we can be effective, and we can use it to really propel this mission forward. And just a lot of good tools, especially just the tools. Jamie was talking about some tools that
Mhm.
she had. She also had a book that I think we're going to surprise some people with. In fact, I have the book, by the way.
All right now.
Yeah, I have the book. I have the book, and very, very good resources in there to let us know how to do this thing properly. So last week, in fact, that's one of those videos, Pastor Paul, Pastor Wade, that we're going to tell our viewers, you got to just replay, go back and just watch that thing again, so that it can give you some advice and encouragement as you go forward in this virtual space.
Good, good.
That is so true. I have to say that after last week's show, I began to rethink my training as a pastor. When I went through school, none of this stuff was part of what we did in the preparation for ministry. But now, man, you're being baptized by fire on how to pivot and use the virtual space for evangelism, digital evangelism. And my takeaway is that, man, I got to go back to school. I got to go back and learn how to do this thing virtually.
Yeah.
And actually, I need to be honest with you guys. On Thursday and Friday of this week, there was a seminar, the virtual seminar, or the virtual on virtual events. It was a training, a 3-day training. I didn't go today, but it was a virtual training event. And man, I learned some things. I didn't learn a lot of new things, but I learned some things that can be added into ministry. So I'm excited about using this space for evangelism.
Awesome.
Listen, Pastor Paul, I told our viewers last week that we have a special person, not a guest, but a special person that's going to be in place today, so that you can see this special person on camera. I want to bring this special person in. Listen, this brother has been a blessing to my church this week. I'm telling you, come on in. You're only live. You got to come on in.
He's just bragging,
I'm going to move
Roger.
out the way. Listen, I'm the lesser light to the greater light. I'm going to move out the way so the greater light can come.
Who is it? Where's the drum roll? Do I have a drum roll?
There he is. There
It's
he is.
TJ.
He's the man.
Hey.
How you doing, TJ? That crowd and everything.
TJ, how you doing, Doc?
How you doing, TJ?
I'm doing well. How are you? It's good to see you both.
All right. Hey, this is a great opportunity to segue, Roger. TJ is the guy behind the website. He has helped to organize and strategize the Pastors Roundtable website that's right above our heads here, thepastorsroundtable.com. You can go there and check out any of our past editions, season 1, season 2. All of those links are up there. So make sure you go and take advantage of that. We'll have different resources that are up there, notes from the various shows you want to go and check out at thepastorsroundtable.com. And this guy over here is largely responsible for that. I know he's got some help that's helping us doing that as well. But TJ, we thank you so much for what you're doing. And a lot of the folk have not met you before, seen you before. I know we've had you on once before, but this is part of the PRT team. So TJ, thank you so very much. And don't spend all of your energy on Dion. You got to come see us over here too, man. All right. All right, listen, one more thing before we move into today's topic. You will notice up at the top of the screen, it looks a little different. We've got a new little icon that we're experimenting with. We want to know, do you like this one? Do you like the other one? Is there something else?
Actually, Dion, as of Pastor Paul, actually, they chose this logo.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes.
Put it out,
yes.
and this logo that was chosen. So
That's right.
we want to thank you for your participation in taking us to the next level, and you'll see some more things come out with the new PRT logo in the future.
And let us know how you feel about this look. We're doing circles today, and all of this that you see in front of us, we experiment from time to time. We'd appreciate your feedback because we want to make this experience something that is good for everybody.
Wait, there's a meeting on the Lido deck. We need to get going. We got to get on the Lido deck where we can enjoy our meeting today. We're on the ship. I'm on the ship paradise here.
Yeah, it feels like we're on a ship looking out some portholes. All right, so listen, gentlemen, our time is getting away from us. What's on the table today, gentlemen?
Roger, what's going on, man?
Wow, we started this year wanting to make sure that we did some relevant things on the issue that we're dealing with right now. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary of being in a lockdown. The world is in a lockdown pandemic. The church had to pause. No, the church had to stop what it was doing and readjust. And a lot of churches across North America, around the world, stopped having in-person service and went online. But now we're beginning to see some churches beginning to open up. And so we thought we would spend some time today discussing what are some of the things we should be considering opening up our churches, ministries, what we should be doing for our ministries and things like that. So we are excited today. You saw the title that we had, Welcome Back, kinda. We are just excited about what God is doing. But we want to do this thing right. So today we want to spend some time talking about what are the best ways, best practices, things that we should consider when we consider reopening.
Awesome. And so so on the table, not on the table, at the table we have today is David Fournier. He is the Vice President of Adventist Risk Management for the North American Division. We are excited to have him with us today. Anything else?
For the world.
Oh, that's right. Not for the world church, not just for NAD, but for the world. Wow. You guys pulling some big hitters, man. This is good stuff. So listen, so no matter where you are on the planet, when it comes to risk management and getting in, we have some resources and some good information for you today. Roger, anything else you want to add before we bring David on?
No, I think, he's a friend of young people. He loves youth ministries. We were chatting in the green room. He was sharing with us that he is excited about the camporee that's coming up. As you know, many of you may not know this. We just found out this week that the camporee is coming to the Mid-America Union. And so we're just so happy in that. But David Fournier is a lover of young people, has the youth at heart, and has this church at heart. So I'm excited to have him join us today. Let's bring him on and let's get started with our conversation.
All right. And here we are. David, welcome. Glad to have you, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So listen, just before we get started, I'm going to step away for a quick second because I'm hot spotting off my phone to run this whole thing. And I just got a message that my battery is about to die. So that we can keep you with us, I'm going to have to go find a charger right quick. But before we do that, David, we're going to give you until I get back to just tell us just a little bit more about yourself, what you do, to shout out grandma. I heard you have some cats, whatever you want to do. I'll be right back.
Well, be quick. No, thanks. Thank you for having me on. I really, really appreciate the program that you guys are doing. It's been an interesting thing. I was able to catch up a little bit looking at some of the videos on YouTube in particular. I really enjoy what you're doing here, and I'm glad that we're able to be part of it. And I think this is a really important conversation to have. So I think we'll have a lot of fun. My own background is I was originally born and raised in Northern Ontario, Canada. So if you hear a little accent every once in a while, a boot and a and whatnot, you might hear a little bit of that. My father is actually a minister. So I was raised in a pastoral home. That's something I learned about the pastoral experience, is it's not just the minister of the family who is working as a minister. It's a team effort. So that's sort of the context of how I was raised in Northern Ontario for the most part. My father actually retired from ministry as the president of the Maritime Conference, and as is so frequently the case with church workers, he of course is back to pastoring part-time in retirement. So I had some pressure. I wouldn't say a lot of pressure, but I had some pressure to pursue the course of ministry myself. But my own interests were a bit diverse. I studied design and art, multimedia. I studied languages, spent some time in our school in France, and ultimately also studied business and ended up working in treasury in the church for a little while before coming to Adventist Risk Management. And I'm delighted that I found my way into this aspect of the church's ministry, because it gives me an opportunity to use my skills and interests for the good of the church. Adventist Risk Management has a saying that we use: our ministry is to protect your ministry. A lot of folks think of us sort of in the context of insurance, but we like to think of it also in the context of education, helping people understand the risks that they face, identify them, figure out what you're up against, and then, of course, what can you do about it? How do you mitigate the risks and or sometimes prevent the risks if at all possible? So I'm really excited to speak with you today. And I do have cats. I wasn't going to bring that up, but hey there.
So you do have cats.
We'd gotten to the cat part of the conversation. So thank goodness you're back.
I'm glad he's back. I didn't want you to be pondering there much longer. But listen, let's get right into the conversation. Dr. Henry, let me pray, and you can ask that first question so we can get going. Father, we thank you for this space. Thank you for this opportunity. We pray that this discussion will bring a light and will bring comfort to those who are concerned about this topic. Is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Dr. Henry, lead us.
Amen. Well, listen, again, like my co-host, we're just so grateful that you were able to make some time to come on our program today. We believe what you have to say is really, really important, especially as we deal with this pandemic. Wow, it's going to come on a year, actually, since we have been, in this stage. And now, there are people who want to get back to the in-person church. There's some who say, listen, no, that's okay. But there's a lot of people. I have a congregation and they want to get back into this in-person church. And so my question to you is simple. How should church prioritize reopening? Like what should we do now as we look forward to, we want to see each other. We do have these mechanisms that we can engage with one another, Zoom and Facebook, YouTube, and all these things. But what should be the priority as we look to reopen? How can we do this and do it well?
It's a great question. It's a big question, right? It's a great first question. My father, when he was asked very large questions, I can remember his first answer would usually be very carefully, full stop. And that's not much of an answer, but I think that's the thing, right? And we'll get into some of the details of that, as we talk a little bit today. But I think from a big picture perspective of how the church relates to challenges in its environment, or it's balancing its missional needs as well as its strategy, right? So how do we be the church going forward? And I like to think that we have mission priorities, and those are really, really important. We also have what I call character priorities. And this is me putting on just a wee bit of a pastor's hat for a second here. But we look at the character of Christ, right? And by beholding, we become changed. We want to love people the way that Christ loved people. And that means caring about their well-being and safety. It's not an idea, I don't think, that's in conflict with the gospel. And in fact, I think Christ's character is the gospel. So I look at reopening, and I think it's a priority. I think it's important because people need to connect. People want to connect. We can connect in lots of ways. You mentioned some good ones, but connection often happens, in person is connection. So I also am reminded, though, that the church is not a building. I do work for an organization that insures many of the church's buildings, so we do care about those. But the church isn't a building, and we can rebuild those. They are just things. And the church is also not just an institution. The church is actually people, and we can connect in more ways than we ever imagined. And we're doing it better than we ever did before.
Wow.
From the virtual space. And our church is a movement. So I think we've had to adapt in the pandemic. And while this has been what I consider trying times, and I try not to make light of that, because people have passed away, people have lost jobs, people have experienced hardship throughout this. But for many, many people, there has been a real opportunity to adapt. And sometimes I think it's good for us to flex our adaptability muscles, right? We may have learned some things that we want to keep with us past this pandemic. Sometimes these hard things create some strength in us. So I hope we don't lose those as we return to normal, right? Whatever normal is. I'm not sure normal is a good word. We were talking about that last night.
Yeah.
And, normal is not always a good word at all. So I hope that we don't look towards normal in the sense of complacency, but I do understand we do need to get together at some point, hopefully safely. So the other thing I like to keep into context as we look at sort of the practical aspects of balancing out the returning to in-person meetings is, the fact that we are part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And each of our churches are not little islands. They are actually, we are part of conferences of churches. So the actions of one church or the leadership of one church do have an impact and can be felt by the rest of the organization. Every once in a while something hits the news where an Adventist church somewhere did something, and you're always like, oh, I hope it was good. And there are so many great stories, but there's potentially some risks that we face as well. So we need to be mindful of the fact that we are part of a larger body, and we do operate as a large organization. I think if I come down to the brass tacks of how do we kind of prioritize it, we need to operate inside the law, first of all. And there are, in different states and provinces, there is different guidance. It's super hard to talk about this. I've done different talks on the pandemic circumstances, webinars and articles, and it's hard to give very specific advice when the circumstances are different in the different locations. This is true even, I'm located in the state of Maryland, and here in the state of Maryland, there's there's the advice given by the governor, but he's also sort of given authority to the counties because the counties have really wildly different experiences. I happen to live in a county with some of the highest transmission rates and positivity rates. The county next to me is also very, very high, but the county on the other side of where I am, in the other direction, extremely low. So Just a real practical example is here in the county I'm located, there's no in-person dining. It's takeout and pickup only, or delivery only. The county across just to the north of us is in-person dining. They have you have to wear a mask into the place, and there's socially distanced, and they have many measures, but it's different to meet a different circumstance and a different environment. So I think knowing that guidance can be very much in line with the circumstances of the area is helpful. And one of the key things we need to consider as we're looking at how do we prioritize opening. They're going to give us guidance as far as how many people are allowed to meet, as well as just those metrics of transmission rates and positivity rates. So I think for most organizations, whether it's a church or otherwise, most organizations have to look at some sort of phased approach. And you may be in a location where, nope, it's important to stay closed, stay virtual. You may be in a location where a very, very controlled and a lot of parameters are going to need to be around any reopening effort. You may be in a location where you're free to go, with very little restriction, and that's I think what we're up against.
Sure, and that's great to hear. I am, as you're talking, there are some questions that are going through my head, kind of following on the end of this. Many of us have seen churches all around the country when governors or local officials have shut a lot of things down, and I know this isn't totally in the wheelhouse of Adventist Risk Management, but I know there's some overlap with some legal stuff with risk management. There are some people that I haven't seen it so much in the Adventist church, but there are some Christians who feel that the government shutting down the churches is an infringement on civil liberties, or religious liberties rather, and that we shouldn't do what man says, we should do what God says, and God says, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. And so no matter what the risk, God will take care of us. No matter what the government or the state says, we need to be in church. Is there a risk management posture on that kind of a dialogue?
As an organization, we tend to stay fairly far outside of that particular discussion. We leave that to our friends in the Office of General Counsel, because we need to operate in what is going to result in practical benefit, right? So there may be a large philosophical concept of, my right to be open regardless of whatever risk there is. I think we need to stay very cognizant of people's, well-being, practical well-being. And for my part, I don't think it is appropriate for one individual or one local church to say, hey, on behalf of the entire conference, union, division, we're going to go ahead and make this problem for the church. We're going to open anyway, and we're going to defy the law. Like I said, I don't think ARM, Adventist Risk Management, is going to weigh in on that a whole lot. It just seems imprudent to me, generally speaking. I think our attorneys could probably unpack the, whether it's constitutionality or whatever it is of that discussion. But from my perspective, it's a bit impractical. I think we are able to meet and continue to gather ourselves together, and we continue to look forward to getting back. And in many cases, many churches have been able to get back well within the law. It just depends on how the rates of infection are going in their location.
Got it.
I hear that. I mean, you just shared with us what are some of the things that churches ought to prioritize. But I just want to ask, we have a lot of churches that are closed. Where I am in this part of the country, we do have some churches that are opening. But what can churches do while they are closed in preparation for reopening? Obviously, we will not be closed the whole time. What can they be doing while closed to prepare themselves for reopening?
That's a really good question. I think I'm going to back it right up, because it goes back to one of those issues that I like I think as Dr. Henry said, we've been closed for almost a year now. We're really at almost that anniversary place, right? So I hope what I'm about to mention has been in process, has been taking place for all of the time that we've been closed. And that is caring for our closed facilities. We look forward to using those facilities again. And as it turns out, our facilities, don't take care of themselves. It doesn't just happen. Bad things can happen to our facilities if we're not mindful of them, and leaving them empty and uncared for, it could be a problem. So, for example, we don't operate out of our office space for the most part right now, where most of our team at Adventist Risk Management are working from our homes. So one of the things that I had to do, I have a little fridge at the office. Had to clear that out, make sure, I didn't have some strange fuzzy things happening in my absence. We had to make sure that things continue to be cleaned. Something that churches in particular really need to be mindful of is freezing temperatures. You want to be sure that you're not going to discover you've had frozen pipes that have just been burst and causing damage in every direction for weeks on end before somebody found out. So maintaining our buildings while they're closed is a really, really important first step, both from just like preventing that humidity, mold, water damage, but also from a security standpoint. This also then it's a good thing for us to think of in being prepared to reopen, right? So we want to maintain our fire and alarm systems. So you don't want to get back into your building and everything's like, okay, we're back in here. Oh, but we didn't recharge our fire extinguishers in over a year. And so they are vastly out of date at that point. I think in the preparation phase, though, there's a lot of preparation that needs to happen before a reopening takes place. And there's a lot of information for this. From Adventist Risk Management, we have some resources on our website. The CDC has finally created a very good page on their website for the faith-based organizations. So it's specific enough for us to relate to guidance that is there. And it's pretty practical. It also relates to things like I was just talking about, just making sure that all of your systems are clear and working before you get into the reopen stage. You're going to want to, of course, also monitor local and state information. One of the issues that closed buildings face is with water systems in particular. If water has been standing for a while, you can end up with, of course, mold, but Legionnaire's disease can form. This is particularly water fountains, those kinds of.
Yikes.
Yeah. And I don't know that that's something we want to face just, like a lay person just trying to figure out. You probably want to bring somebody in and have things tested. You want to have your HVAC, your heating, ventilation, air cooling systems checked, filters replaced. We've become really sensitive, and appropriately so, to what's in the air transmitted. So you want to make sure those filters are clear and clean, that the place has been aired out, and that you've done a thorough cleaning. making sure that your safety systems are all up to standards that are for those systems. So then you need to start, you need to have plans in place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I was saying I see some stuff in the chat, some questions in the chat. Maybe you could address some of this. It says there is also a greater risk of remaining closed beyond a necessary time frame. What do you think about that? I mean, some people just the society, kind of opens things up. Some people are a little bit more cautious. Is there a danger in doing that as well? Probably just remaining closed, even though you might be able to open up for some people?
I think that's potentially an issue that you as pastors may be able to speak to better than I can, and that is what happens to a group when you don't have that momentum forward as a community. I don't know if there's as much of a practical side of that from just your facilities, or from the health and well-being of your members, as we normally think about it. But our sense of friendship, our sense of community, I think, does suffer. And I think it's important for us to really address that. And I think there's been amazing work done in that area, via Zoom meetings, small groups. I think small groups have had a real opportunity during this pandemic to become more intentional than ever before. I think that's a really powerful thing in our church, and I think folks have been more intentional about being part of that. But it's not hard to let it all slide away too.
Right.
That's right.
I think this is an area you gentlemen can probably speak to a lot better than I can, but there is a point to be made there.
You brought up a very good point about the building. As you were sharing, I think a lot of pastors and leaders have more focused on the people than think about the building. And because there was this big shift in thinking that, the church is the people. But there is that reality that our buildings are important to the continuation of our mission in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a food pantry or it could be, even the worshiping options there. And I really do appreciate the thought that, hey guys, we need to remember that there are some things we need to do in the building. We have one of our viewers asked the question whether risk management believes that churches, the ventilation system thing should change. That was a big discussion in the airline business about the ventilation system. Is that something, I know that might be way above the heads of many of our members or of our churches, but should we care about some of those issues that have been making the news?
I think there's different standards that we'll be measured by, right? Like, I tend to think of things very much in the context of liability and by what standard will something be measured. So if you're on an airplane, take on a commercial flight, the airline is being held to a fairly, I would say, very high standard, because it's such a controllable and specific environment, right? It's a commercial airliner. They only make so many different kinds of these things, and you're at such risk, or at least there's this perception that we're at such risk. We're in a tube flying through the air, having the right kind of ventilation in that enclosed and specific environment where you're going to have to be in there for a prolonged period of time, and there have to be systems to move that air through that space. I think there's a very high standard of care there. I think we should be mindful of the same issues in the context of our church facilities. But what are your options really? Is it are you going to sell your building because it doesn't really meet your expectations in this new environment? Are you going to replace your entire HVAC systems to meet this need? I have heard of some organizations making investment in advanced HVAC systems or related systems. What I've heard mostly from the engineers, and I did have the opportunity to pick some engineers. They said those are some neat ideas, advanced technologies. There's some really interesting technologies that tries to either using light or all kinds of different technology, kind of zap or clean all of the air that goes through it. They look at all of those options as very much secondary to the basics of you need to ventilate your location. That means opening some doors and windows. You need to clean the place effectively, and you need to change your filters and have a professional give your system a clean at least annually, if not more frequently during this time. Some of those fancier ideas probably have a lot of benefit, but is it entirely cost effective? And what is the standard that your church is going to be held to? I think there's a few different priorities to weigh there. If you had, let's say, a rural church building in, and it doesn't even have an HVAC system, the HVAC system is, opening doors and windows. Well, what standard can you really be held to? You're going to control the number of people who are able to come and worship in that space, and you're going to open your windows. That's probably all you can do, and somebody would be pretty hard pressed to come up with an argument that you're not doing what you can and should.
Wow. So I'm thinking as I'm reading some of the other questions, I saw a question from Tyrone. Where'd it go? Tyrone Burton. I want to put that up. He says, beyond the routine management kinds of things that need to be done as per CDC guidelines, what types of spiritual or churchy things should pastors and members be doing to prepare for re-entry? And I want to get to a little bit more detail on that. And I know we had something lined up later in the program for that. But with that in mind, are there some processes that the church should consider before we make a decision to reopen? I know this is kind of some of what we've been talking about, but beyond what we have said at this point, is there a team that needs to be put in place? Is there, some of those processes, some of those things before a church makes that decision to reopen? And are there requirements that should be adhered to that are coming to us, not just from the local governments, but is there something from a local conference, from a local risk management, for whether it be the union or NAD or World Church? Because people are wondering, how do we, not just wondering, they want to know, how are you going to protect me and my family when you open the doors of the church? They want to know. There are some, let me make this clear. There are some who don't care. They're ready to roll up in there right now because they missed the fellowship and they're just, gung-ho cavalier about it. There are others who are like, yeah, I don't want to be around y'all when y'all sing because y'all gonna be spitting everywhere. When I don't want no congregational singing. I don't want no praise team. Pastor needs to wear a shield because he spits when he preaches because it's I clean that. All of that stuff. How do we keep the people safe?
Yeah, it's.
I know I throw a bunch at you there, but.
It is a lot, right? Because there's so many different factors that need to weigh into that conversation. I think from Adventist Risk Management's perspective, the advice we give is to start, of course, with the local contextualized advice that you're being given, especially in a pandemic. The differences between one community, let's say here in Maryland, as compared to, I don't have a great example off the top of my head of a state that just doesn't have very many cases at all. But there does seem to be a higher incidence in some parts of the country as opposed to others. So the regulations and the guidance in those areas are going to be different, right? I saw some great advice for the school systems, and I think in principle, and this is just in principle, it's a good mechanism for us to follow as well. How we apply it is something we have to navigate. I definitely think the way that the church is structured matters. Your conference and the way we have conferences in the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a unique and powerful thing. I don't know if everyone, ever spends some time thinking about the amazing gift we have in our organizational structure, but it allows us to work as a much larger organization. It also gives administrative and oversight at sort of a higher level, either a state or two states or so, where a lot of churches are working together as one organization. Looking for the guidance from the conference is, in my mind, a high priority. I think that should matter a great deal because it is designed for solving exactly this challenge. The conferences are going to be looking to figure it out too, though, right? And this is developing. So don't go calling your local administration saying, "Hey, Dave said you tell me what to do." But definitely check with them, right? I think it's good to have a real working relationship with the conference. That's what they're there for. You can tell them I said that part. But here's the three metrics. Like if I was to look at it, that really, in my mind, help me guide figuring out, hey, is this a good time for us to open, or do we need to go and close again? And this comes out of the education system, and you can learn more about this on the CDC. There's what they call the measures of community burden. I love the lingo; it's great. But the number of new cases per 100,000 persons within the last 14 days. Okay, so this is not something you are in control of. This is just what's happening in your community, right? That's the community burden. What is the situation out there? And that's a nice measure of the activity of the pandemic in your community, the number of new cases per 100,000 persons. And another good measure that I would use with that is the percentage of positivity during the last 14 days. So you have these two metrics that give you a sense of there's how much of it's in our community and how quickly is it growing, right? And they have some great information on how to measure that. Again, on the CDC, they have some charts and whatnot. The third area is really your preparedness to implement and navigate the environment, right? So that is your ability to adhere to the following key mitigation strategies. So we're just talking about the things like, are our people prepared to wear masks at church? Are we going to do that? Or are we going to struggle to do that? Is that going to be a real hard thing for us to do? Are we able to actually do some social distancing in our facility? Have we planned and are we organized to do that effectively? Do we have hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette? Like, have we communicated it? Are we, do we have the hand sanitizer? When you go into the restrooms, is it really well set up for this? One of the things that I always like to look for if I'm in public somewhere is, okay, how do I get out of here now that I'm in here without touching stuff that is going to, I just washed my hands and that's great, but now I'm going to be touching things, the door handle. Can I get out of here without, kind of ruining everything? So what is our plan for cleaning and disinfection? And are we up to speed with the requirements of contact tracing, with our local government. Let's say we did have an incident of somebody in our community contracting COVID-19. Do we know what to do with that? Do we know what they need to do? Do we know who to talk to? And do we know how to let them back into our group once they're well again? Knowing how prepared we are for that gives us a comfort level to say, yeah, we are prepared for that, or no, we're not yet ready. And you measure those three metrics of the incidence of the population, the positivity rate, and your ability to actually implement strategies. And that becomes, in my mind, kind of how you figure if you're ready to open and to what degree.
Wow. You just blew me away with that thought about how do I get out of here? Church is normally a place where we play. I've seen parents bring their kids and just let them run loose in the church. They're in the building.
Right.
Now we got to think about how do we get out of here. Today, folks, we are just here at the Pastors Roundtable talking to David Fournier from Adventist Risk Management on how do we think the process of how we think about reopening. We have some good questions in the chat. David, I think a number of our viewers are talking about a unified process. I know our church is not big on unification, unifying things and sharing that, but they are sharing that we should have a unified process because there are so many voices that are talking. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just excited that we are taking the time and sharing and helping us to think about some of these things that sometimes we don't even consider when we think about church, because we can't tend to be so let our guards down so much. But thank you for being here with us. I think the question, Dr. Henry, you have the next question as to where we want to go.
Yeah, we're still, on this being safe, and I think that's important. As you were talking before I get to the next question, I was thinking about, if you want to go into a nursing home, there's some nursing homes you cannot go into, or assisted living facility, you cannot go into them. But there's some who have opened, and they have this screening process where they're checking your temperature, and they have some things in place. And I know that in the church there are some churches that have reopened. They have instituted probably some of those things in this screening process. But maybe there's somewhere we can check, and I think we'll get to that probably later on. Maybe a resource, maybe from Adventist Risk Management, or maybe some other document that kind of gives our members some training on, okay, what are some things we need to screen for? We know the temperature check, and are there some specific questions we need to ask when people do reopen? I think those things are helpful, and maybe we could talk about that a little bit as well. So, when we know about this virus, and they have this new strand coming out too, I heard on the news the other day, and I think they had the first case and so forth. But with all these things going on, I mean, we talked about precautions. We talk about being safe. What other areas should we look at as a church when we are just thinking about reopening? And I know we talked about that a little bit, but are there some other specific things, even from a risk management perspective? Like, what are some specific things that we can think about right before we reopen? Because again, we just want to be safe,
Yeah, I think there's so much we can do. One of the things that I think of, I like to think in the broad category of team, right? So do we have, I think you mentioned earlier the idea of, do we need to form a committee to work on the reopening plan? I think the church does really well to put a small team together. We encourage the idea of a church safety officer. to be an appointed member of the board and to really spearhead a lot of the church's risk and safety issues. But I think in many cases that person's also well served by working with a cross-ministry safety committee, a team of people, because some of these need to be implemented not just in a general sense across the church, but also need to be implemented across the specific ministries. So having that buy-in and support from leaders across ministries is really important, I think, as well. This is an interesting and large project. Having a team work through these details, if you have somebody with particularly healthcare expertise, if you have nurses, doctors, somebody like that you can harness who's in your congregation, I would look to capitalize on those resources for sure. Then I think we also need to look at, once we move into reopening, do we have the staff support that we actually need to meet the requirements? So what I mean by that is, let's say that we're talking about a little church somewhere, and Sister Smith, who's 85 years old, has stood at the front door and greeted people as they entered there for the last 45 years. And she's a blessing and she enjoys that, right? But Sister Smith in this case is a particularly vulnerable person. And the person who is sort of taking care of that greeting department duty, it needs to shift their duties a little bit. They need to also be, some locations may actually be taking some temperatures as people enter the building. That most places that are open that you can go into, if you had to go to a dentist's office, or if you had to, some restaurants even are taking temperatures as you go in. So it is a helpful screening process. Or they may be saying, "Oh, hey, let's make sure that everybody who attends understands that all the signage and communication we've done, we mean this, and if you're showing up without a mask, hey, here's one for you." To kind of initiate that conversation, help ensure that everybody's participating, understands how it's going to work here now. And maybe Sister Smith isn't the right person for that job anymore, because she is, I believe, at that age, she's in a category of higher risk, and this really, having her be the front line to greet every person who comes in, really puts her at undue risk. So I would say also, I would hesitate to tell elderly folks or people with an immune compromised system that, I don't want to make decisions for them. But hopefully they're fairly reluctant, and sometimes you need to be upfront that we're not expecting them to be on the front lines or be the first people back. In fact, we want to minister to them, we want to reach them, but we want them to be safe first of all. So you may have really key people, right, who you really usually depend on to perform certain functions, and they may not be part of your solution in this particular phase, right? So then you need to look at your facility and say, hey, how do we accommodate some social distancing? I don't understand the terminology social distancing. I don't know why our society got stuck on that word, but it's physical distancing.
That's
right. Anyway,
Yeah.
But everybody uses social, so that's I want to use it. Or like, how do we preserve social bubbles, right? So like when my family would go to church, we are maybe sitting close together, but that's because we live together in the same house. That's okay. But does our space really accommodate for that, or do we need to actually change from our regular full-length service into maybe several services in order to accommodate 50% occupancy or less. So
he's trying to
those are
make you work double time, triple time, Pastor Henry.
Yeah, you want to be there for
as
that
you were talking,
third service.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about these other rooms in the church. I mean, we're talking about the worship service, the main service, but there's some other rooms that we have in the church that we use for children's Sabbath school. We use the mother's room. It'll be interesting to see those who have reopened. Are those rooms utilized? I think we just really got to be cautious on opening up, because we really have to keep our members safe. I think that's the number one priority. So you're mentioning some really good concepts and some specific things. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
There's some other things,
and that's really what the planning process needs to go through. Sorry, our audio's going a little back and forth here.
Go ahead, Dr. Henry.
Okay. I think I'm okay. So, from a risk management perspective, and again, you're offering some real good tips, real good specific things on what we need to think about, as we open up the church. I mean, you covered from the facility, and as you were covering that too, and you mentioned it, I was thinking about some of those facilities where there's not good ventilation. I mean, some facilities it's hard to open up the windows. I've been that before. From a risk management perspective, and you know the buildings within our church, are there certain places though that because of the building, because the ventilation is bad, because of maybe the age of the building, are there some places that should I'm just gonna say shut down? Like I'm just gonna say it. There's some places that just shut down because we have this pandemic, and the building is just it's small, it's small and no ventilation, and it's just a risk being in there. Are there some buildings where you say, listen, we just might need to look a different direction so that we could be safe?
Yeah, I think that there probably are. I think size is probably one of the most critical factors. Ventilation is certainly also one. Most buildings have engineered into them, even older buildings, some form or process of ventilation. Whether it's just a simple window. But it's always amazing. I say that out loud, and I know there is going to be some exception out there, and really having an awareness of what is the ventilation ability of this facility, what is the size, how far can we spread people out, what is our occupancy, and that's the maximum number of people who are allowed to be in here. Well, how many people can we practically allow in here when they're distanced? And sometimes even your local authorities are going to have a number in mind for you. So if your occupancy is at 100, they may be saying, okay, you can open at 50%. Well, you're going to have to work through some logistics to figure that out. Some people are going to be reluctant to return anyway. Those who are either just more fearful or have some causes for concern. But yes, I think your ability to understand what building you have absolutely plays a strong role in this. I think another area that we can't underemphasize, I probably haven't mentioned it enough, is communication. I think communication as a leadership team is critical. Helping your church prepare for what reopening looks like is a really, really important area. Having signage in place, but also having, maybe a church meeting or two, having communicated via email. Folks, it's going to be a bit different for a while. This is not forever, but this is the next step for us as we move back, or hopefully back. and helping understand, we're going to be wearing the masks, we're going to be worshiping a little bit differently. You mentioned the other rooms, and I think for many churches, reopening the children's Sabbath school is not one of the first things they do. Children's Sabbath school is wonderful. I actually got to participate in that when my daughter was going through those ages. I taught primaries for a few years, and I really enjoyed that. We had a lot of fun in primaries. So, challenging thing though is children, don't have quite the same impulse control, and they usually use things, and honestly, so do we all, right? We use hymnals, we pass offering plates, we hold bulletins, they are going to use the various teaching aids, and a lot of that needs to be set aside for the time being, so that we're not just handing and transmitting infection. So it's all part of the thought process for sure.
And I'm reading some of these questions and stuff about potlucks, and Yvette is saying that there was a time when she's telling Sheila that there was a time when they would stay at church all day long, and I don't know. I'm one of those who I kind of like the whole virtual space and the what we accomplish and whatnot, but I'm just getting a little nostalgic reading some of these comments here about being in the space, and I miss that. As I'm thinking, as we move, I don't know if we're ready for the next question, but just as I'm listening to the conversation, there's a whole lot that's going through my head, is the different polar postures that exist in the church, and that can be seen as a negative thing, and I'd like to maybe spin it in this light, and it says that because we have people who still think that the pandemic is the plandemic, or that it's fake, that it's a hoax, that nobody's really getting sick, they're just making stuff up. We have others who are just on the opposite side of that. I just want to illustrate that just illustrates how big the Seventh-day Adventist tent is. That we're welcoming people who want to be ready for Jesus to come, and we're just finding ways to be able to work with everybody to be able to spread that message of hope. So this is a great place to be. I love even having the debate. It says, it reiterates that this is a big tent.
Yes.
I was gonna add one to that, Pastor Paul. You said it's a plandemic. It's a strandemic. In other words, a time to strategize as well. How to do this thing better. Wow, this thing has really pushed our church to new levels. To how do we engage while we can't be in the same space? And I think that churches are really, I think we've risen to the occasion. We've taken on this challenge. And one thing that's getting, I know we're going to go to the next question, but one thing that I'm concerned about is that once that time comes for people to get back in the building, in fact, it was just mentioned, I think, on a show that we had last month, that they actually lost some of the engagement. One person came on the show and they were mentioning that they were, doing online, everything was good. They had a team, but when they went back in the church, there was less engagement. So we got to keep that engagement even when you go back in the building. And because I think what we're doing now, in my opinion, is, I want to say it's really more effective as far as reaching the masses. We're going to do I know people want to hug and kiss each other and so forth, but this right here, I think, is really effective. We got to keep it going, even when people are allowed to come back in.
That is true. That is so true. So let's look at let's turn it around a little bit. As you know, we're talking about re-entering. What are some of the practices you've seen, David, implemented in the worship communities? What are some of the things you've seen out there that, in terms of safety or doing things different?
Because not everybody's closed right now, right? There are some people who are already open and they're already doing some implementing some things. Yeah.
Some places have opened and then closed back up again. I've heard about that, and some of them may actually be open again. So I think that's, to me, it's a good sign. I like that people are continuing to monitor and that they're making thoughtful decisions based on what they can do and what's happening in their community. I think that's important. I think that's the right way to do this. So things that I've seen, though, I actually had the opportunity to go to a church that had some reopening. They would meet, they didn't advertise, they couldn't tell anyone about it. They were allowed, per local guidelines, they were allowed to do this. And so I actually did make a visit there. And I was expecting to be a little bit, risk management hat on. Oh man, oh no, what are they doing here? What are they doing there, right? Inspector mode, right? And I was delighted with what I saw. They had a fantastic process for when you entered the church. There was signage outside. So they had what I'd call sort of a soft open. It was only a small group in there. It was a large building, but maybe only 50 people meeting in person. They're streaming it to most of their congregation and guests. They had pews taped off so that you knew where to sit and where not to sit, so that there was good spacing between people. Something I really enjoyed, a logistical problem they solved effectively, I thought, was offering. They did a nice offering appeal, and the offering appeal is important, right? And they emphasized online giving. And there's such a great opportunity for that. I've learned that before the pandemic, maybe 22% of our church here in North America was giving online. And I've heard that since this has started, we're up to 60-some percent using the online giving processes. So that's a great solution for that. But they also realize that some folks give in person, and that's great too, slightly more challenging in this context. And so they, rather than passing a plate, they have a bucket at the back of the church, and folks would drop off their offering as they walked through the back door. So another one that I saw at a different church was they didn't do this for church service on Sabbath morning, but they would do Friday programs. They have a beautiful lawn, a great big tree, and so they actually brought some speakers outside, and the people who were leading the services would stand on the front steps of the church. Everyone else is sitting on this big, beautiful lawn under the tree. They bring their own, lawn chairs or whatever, and so you have the benefit of the outdoor ventilation. You can't get more ventilated than that. And they were distanced, and they were able to see each other at least and be together. So it was really, really helpful. Another one I saw back at the first church I mentioned, I didn't partake in this. I should have checked it out just for research purposes, but they normally do a potluck absolutely every week. And it's a real highlight for their church. They love doing that. So potluck is not an advised thing to do. The cafeteria style, just everything about it doesn't work well for trying to prevent transmission. But what they had done rather is they pretty much, had packaged lunches prepared and sealed, so folks could just pick them up. And they were trying to retain that part of the experience. I thought it was pretty cool. Also heard about take-home communion kits. This is the one I'm probably, shaking my head about a little bit more than the others, but still, an opportunity for families to, engage in that process together. I just feel bad for the single folks, I don't know how you wash your own. I mean, I guess you wash your own feet. It really ruins the experience. But they had that solution in place where you could pick up the juice and the sacraments there and conduct that as a group, even in a virtual context. So I think creativity that people have done and shown to meet the challenge in this very strange environment.
Yeah. For me, I think the biggest, I think the one that got me the most was when they had drive-up church. You would come to church and you do it in the parking lot, and the pastor will come out on the steps or on the thing, and then he'll be preaching, and they'll transmit it via some kind of low-end radio. FM station. Yeah. But I think people became very innovative when it came to the pandemic, and so many different ideas came up. I actually, when you talked about in-home communion, I actually made the bread and I sat around the table. It was the first time that I was able to really serve my family communion. Sat around the table and we did it with a little communion bread that I made, and had we had the real grape juice. My wife went out and made sure she purchased some real grape. But and the cups were a little bigger than normal, so we had fun with it. But the innovation has been seen. One of the things that we have noticed in our chat, and we need to start wrapping up our time here, but one of the things I've noticed in the chat is that our folks all agree that we should not be in the church right now. They all agree that even at the beginning of our conversation, many people said that they love this virtual opportunity they have to do church than being in person. And so I have to be honest with you that a lot of our members feel comfortable with this pivot, and they feel that being the safety of themselves and those who are vulnerable are more important than actually having church as normal, whether it be service, whether it be the things we do with our pantries and with food giveaways. Those things are important too, don't get me wrong, but they felt that the safety of our members were high priority for our churches.
Yeah.
Well, and like what you said, Pastor Wade, people are becoming really creative in doing this thing. I do want to just address one last thing as we wrap it up. When you have multiple services, then you got to do cleaning between those services. And so I think that's something else that we need to think about. How much time do we need to clean the building? And maybe that's not a question for today, but how much time do we need to clean the building so that it can be ready for the next service?
Yeah. Well, listen, just as we wrap this up, David, are there any resources, things that could be made available to pastors, to churches, as they are contemplating and prepping to reopen? Are there books, CDs, websites, workshops, seminars, money, checks, anything like that that's available for churches as they are prepping and planning and hoping to reopen?
How did money and checks get in there? That was good.
Hey, it costs money to do this stuff.
As preachers, we like to add that in every now and
then. Yeah, we're preachers, man. That's what we got to do.
There's the offering call right there. That was good. Yeah, absolutely. There's some great resources. That's been a fun part of this whole experience is the whole world not really knowing how to face this thing and having to figure it out and deal with imperfect information along the way. I'm probably understating that. Anyway, the CDC does have really good guidance at this point, though. So there's a great page if you search for that. The CDC faith-based. You're going to find. It didn't take me long to find it at all. Adventist Risk Management, AdventistRisk.org. We have a dedicated page to questions related to COVID-19 and the pandemic. You don't even have to look for it. Right now, it's the banner ribbon on our website. So it's the first thing at the very top of the page. One of the things that we did, there's a whole information page there, but we also did a webinar on reopening churches. This was back in May or June. I think May actually of last year. It's about an hour long, and it goes into some of what we talked about here today. We also did a whole series of webinars for schools as well. We worked with an engineering firm on that one because it got into maybe more specific engineering topics and the unique realities of schools. So I think those are some of the main places to check for sure, and most governments have a pretty steady stream of information that they're providing about transmission rates and positivity rates and that kind of thing, but as well guidance as to what the expectation is in that state or county or so. Yeah.
Awesome. So on that website you mentioned, there's a place where I can go and submit a claim that my church has been infected by COVID, and I can
help me with yeah. Actually, we do have a great big filing a claim button on our website. If you do have a claim that needs to be submitted, there is a great big button for that, and the team is happy and ready to work with you. Hopefully, you don't have a COVID claim, though. That doesn't seem as likely.
All right.
So right along with that, one of our viewers asked the question about the liability concerns. I think, maybe we can end around on this one as the insurer of many of our church buildings and church and the church organization. What, some people may think, oh, we got insurance for that, or is there insurance for this? Is that something that is the norm or the practice? Because insurance follows the norms.
Yeah. So this has been a really interesting one. Talk about, a developing area. We're watching that very, very closely. Overwhelmingly, what we've seen over the last year is the insurance industry as a whole has quickly limited its exposure to communicable diseases. That tends to be the term that they're using for this pandemic and COVID-19, but really it's a broad term that applies to a lot. So they tend to use the term communicable disease. And so exclusions on every front, very little coverage available at all. In fact, because of that, the officers of Adventist Risk Management, our president called for a board meeting. We called our board together, and we said, the world is excluding this coverage. We believe that this is a time for the church's captive insurance company to step up a little bit and provide a backstop and to make sure that we have a bit of something. It may not be, the same kind of limits of insurance that we have for some of the other types of liabilities, but there is coverage in place. The good news, and they approved that. I guess I should finish the story and say, and they did approve that. So we were able to put that coverage into place, or I guess to put it another way, to preserve that coverage, because it was there in the past, and the rest of the industry, including reinsurers, were looking to exclude it. So we're able to help in that way for those that we provide primary insurance. The good news, we think, and we're watching this develop in the marketplace, is that it seems difficult so far for individuals to hold an organization responsible for transmission of COVID-19. So that's not necessarily been the case in the past between specific individuals. You remember, back in the day when there was, the sort of the spike in HIV and AIDS, one person could transmit the disease to another person is fairly easy to track what happened there. Not always the case, but there were successful lawsuits to say you knew you had this and you knowingly gave it to me. In this case, it's harder to hold a church responsible, we believe, and we hope it continues to be this way, for seeing COVID-19, because then you have to prove that you definitely got and positive from attending that location. That's a very difficult thing to prove, because the person may have gotten gas at the gas station the night before, they may have had a delivery, or they may have gone to get groceries. There's a lot of places who might have gotten it. It's not to say that it couldn't happen, but it's a difficult thing so far. And of the cases that are in the courts, so far, most of them seem to be siding with the defense and the insurance company. So hopefully that trend continues, because you don't want to be accused and or held responsible for when you're doing your best to prevent any transmission of COVID. You don't want to be accused and convicted or have to settle based on that.
Amen. Well, that's good to know. Listen, everybody, our guest today has been David Fournier. He is the Vice President of Adventist Risk Management, and we are just so delighted he was able to take the time to spend with us today. So, David, thank you so very much for taking the time and contributing in such a meaningful way. We're going to take some of those resources that you mentioned to us and make them available to our guest on our website and on our Facebook page. So thank you again. And any other questions that our audience may have, we want you to feel free to post them either in the question section or the comment section on the YouTube channel, or in the chat on the Facebook page as you're watching today. Roger,
Yes.
what do we got going on next week, Doc?
We are actually going to continue our conversation. We are planning to have with us a conversation centered around the COVID-19 vaccine. And
That's
so
right.
we want to spend some time in educating our viewers and our listeners on the vaccine. And so we talked a little bit about an opening today. We're going to continue this kind of conversation talking about the vaccine on next week. So you do not want to miss that. And then sometime, just to kind of cast the vision, sometime down in the month of February, as you know, February is normally the Black History Month. We are going to want to spend some time celebrating Black history in our communities. And so please stay tuned to Pastor's Roundtable, as we will be dealing with some aspect of that as we go into this month of February.
And let me just add to that, next week program, you definitely want to get on. We have someone who has worked on vaccines, Dr. David, we're staying with the D's, Dave Burt will be on the show next week. So you're going to want to make sure that you make it to this show so that you'll know a little bit about this vaccine and what's happening as it relates to COVID-19.
Listen, as we wrap up, I know there are some of you that are wondering, or may have wondered, and we wrestled with this, how is it and why is it that we would take time on a Sabbath afternoon to talk about risk management and money type of a stuff and building? And I think this is our collective position on this, is that there are people who will not step into our buildings if they don't feel safe. And so what we've been talking about today at its core is evangelism, that we are prepping to be able to reach people for Jesus Christ. And we want to make sure that every church, every congregation, that you've thought through some of the processes that are important and that are necessary to make our communities feel like coming into our buildings in this environment is something that they want to do. And so we just want to encourage you to stay faithful in what you're doing, whether you're going to stay in the virtual world, whether you're going to move into your buildings. Just stay faithful to what God is placed in front of you. Do the work that is at hand, that is close at hand, and God's going to continue to bless this church.
Awesome. And we just want to let you know, as listeners and viewers that we'll have David Fournier's contact information on the website, in the chat. He has consented that if you have questions, your pastor or as a team leader, you're welcome to contact our Adventist Risk Management. They have a team ready to answer questions. They are very customer oriented, and they want to be of service to our church. And so you can go to the website if you don't want to wait for the information, get in there. But I know he is willing to be of service to you, to help you feel comfortable and safe as we move forward in sharing the gospel to this community, your community, and to this world.
All right, Raj.
Listen.
Get
Paul,
there.
Can we get it? Let me just ask you this before we even go there. Can we get it right this week? Hey, listen, I think we can do it. We can do it. We can do it.
Okay, Roger first, me second, Dion last. Is that how we're gonna do it?
Last, right? So
okay.
Yeah, we're gonna Roger first. I like that.
David, thank you again. Thank you again, David, for being with us, and we look forward to maybe ministering in the future. And we want to thank our viewers for joining us today, and being a part of this discussion. I want you to know that we're excited here at the Pastors Roundtable, where we aim to help you keep ministry relevant,
resourced,
and real.